You may be familiar with our Deco Noir beading kit. It's a great introduction to Peyote Stitch, and it also utilises the lovely E-hooks as the clasp, so you can see there. Now our original Deco Noir bracelet kit is done in quite dark colours, so I thought I'd try it out in a very, very pale colour. So that's using the opaque light smoke colour in Delicas and also galvanised silver, which I just think looks really nice together, and you still get that effect of the matte and shiny together, which is what I was aiming for. So I thought, now that I've started this project, I'd actually show you how to connect the E-hook onto the end here. So using lighter coloured beads with a dark hook, and I'm going to utilise some red thread for the purpose of the demonstration, which I thought would make life a lot easier. So for this I'm just going to ignore that thread, because after I've done this I will be finishing off properly with the appropriate thread. So for this purpose I'm going to slide that in there, move that thread out of the way, and then this just folds over the top of the gap in the hook, and you can see with this particular pattern the actual stripes line up nicely. It's actually folding over, you can see on this side the amount of rows it's folded over, so that it fits nice and snug. It's 10 beads in from the edge, and if you can line it up, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this easier. There we go. Let me refocus. Okay, so with my thread I'm going to go in to the side here that I'm going to be anchoring in. So that is through the bead on the bracelet here. Then you kind of having a zipping effect, so I'm going to be working back and forth along the two pieces to bring them together. So next I'm going to go through that thread, that bead on the end there. Just going to hold that in place so you can see where the thread path is going at the moment. So in there, across, in there. So now I need to go through the next bead on the bracelet. So it's really important as you do this that you make sure that you're working the same row across there, so you'll be alternating as you go, because you'll be matching up with the beads on this side as well, but you don't want to be jumping back and forth along there. So then you go back there, and you can now start to see the red thread there is connecting together. I find it easier to pull the thread up as you go so that you can see that it's coming together. You can do that at the end as well, particularly if you're struggling to see your row of beads. So you through the next one there, then across there, so you can see the stitches there as I've done them in red. So when you pull that tight, you can see that it's zipped it all together, and you can't really see the thread at all there now, and it's nicely tied in and keeping all the stripes the same there, so it looks really neat on both sides. Get the thread out of the way. So that's how you secure that and attach it, so you've still got movement on there but it's not flopping about. And then you would fasten in your threads. So I tend to go back along and zip back, so I'll go down the next bead and then you're kind of zipping back on top of your row of beading, it stops these little beads at the side from flopping about as well, and then you just weave in your threads as you would normally in Peyote Stitch. So when it comes to attaching the hook so you can actually hook it in, this side would already be connected to one end of your bracelet, so you need to be able to create a loop on the other side that can accommodate your hook. Now, having already done this and following the instructions, I know that that's 24 rows in, so the easiest way to do that is to count 12 beads on the edge there and then connect it at that point. Now fortunately for me, that also makes the pattern line up on this side as well, so this actually mirrors that lay on top of there, actually fits in just neatly. So again, you would do the same where you're kind of zipping, so I find turning this round to do is much easier, and starting from one side. So I'll go in there and across, making sure I'm lining up with the right beads there. So that's zipping together quite nicely. It's just back and forth, making sure you're connecting to the right row of beads. When you've got a pattern, that's actually slightly easier to keep track of. And there we go. So that's zipped together. And it just means if you created a little loop at the end. Again, you'd fasten off your threads appropriately, so going back down and re-zipping, zigzagging across. But just to show you how it all works, when that's attached to the other end of your bracelet, this end then just hooks in, and as you're wearing it, that little curl there just stops that from sliding out until you actually want to slide it out, like so. So quite a useful gadget. And quite often with bead weaving, the hardest thing is finding neat ways to finish off your bead weaving and incorporate a clasp. So that's a really neat, nice way of doing that. So I'm going to attach one of the E-clasps to this Peyote Stitch beading. Now I just had a look to see how well it will fit, and the best way to do that is by picking up delicas on your beading needle and actually seeing how many fit ideally in that slot. You don't want them to be too snug, and equally you don't want them to be sliding around very easily in there. So that's 10 beads that fit inside there. And this beading is 15 beads wide and this is 10, so it's going to look slightly offset. However, this side of the clasp is much wider than this side, so I'm going to make sure that I've set it in slightly more on this side, so the beading is filling across here rather than directly in the centre. It will all make a bit more sense as I get going. So to begin with, I need to get my thread into the right position to be able to start adding my beading that's going to sit and wrap around this section of the clasp. Move that out of the way. So at the moment, my beading thread is coming directly out of the corner here, so I need it to actually be coming out of this third bead here. So I'll just weave it through these beads. Get diagonally through all three, yes I can. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm now in the right position to bead across. I need to make sure that I'm beading to 2 in from this side and 3 in from this side. And the advantage of doing this, although my bracelet's been made with odd count Peyote Stitch, this section that I'm adding at the end will actually be even count, which makes life a little bit easier. So, as soon as I get to this bead here, I can start building up my section that will fit through the clasp here. So I'm picking up a new bead and just going directly above here, and that will form the new section. Now I've reached across this bit, I want to turn again. Oops, pinging beads everywhere. So you continue adding rows here. Right, so I'm just going to continue adding beads at this part. So I'll speed this up so you don't have to painstakingly watch me do it incredibly slowly. So I've now beaded a section here long enough to be able to wrap around and sew back down to keep the E-clasp in place. So I made this 16 rows long, and so there's 8 beads on the edges there, which is often the easier way to count how many rows you've done. It needs to do an even number, so then when this rolls back down I can easily zip this in between the beads here. So we need to take the needle and the beading through the E-clasp, making sure that it's the right way round. So we left a bigger gap because this side was bigger here, so I've matched that up again, and then the beading threads through and folds round and secures in place along here. So it's easier to pick this up and turn it round to do the bead, to the actual zipping up. So you can see here that the thread is coming out here, and you can line the beads up all in these columns here.
So the beading and the thread here is a little bit dark to fully see. So it's exactly the same process used at the beginning of the video, where you could clearly see the thread path with the red thread. And you just zip across in exactly the same way. And again, I always work back on myself, which makes it extra secure. And then you weave in the threads as normal.